It's witchcraft.
Hi, and welcome to an especially spooky Salem, Massachusetts episode of the Stoned Witches Hour. On this podcast, two best friends living on opposite coasts of the USA share spooky, true, creepy tales from their half of the country. This week, for episode 38, we continue our tour of Salem, Massachusetts with a visit to the Salem Witch Board Museum, and we talk about all things Ouija board. With my fingers lightly on the planchette, I'm Layla.
And I'm High. I'm eating nerd gummy clusters, and I'm Chelle.
Yeah, starting early on that Halloween candy, I see.
Oh my God.
I don't really like nerd clusters, so I don't really want any.
This shit's good. Like, they make candy for adults nowadays, I swear.
McDonald's Happy Meals for adults, candy for adults. I mean, cover in dark chocolate, and I'm pretty much there. I'm not really like the fruity candy kind of girl, but dark chocolate? Hell yes.
I gotcha. Well, so today we've smoked a lot of weed.
Yeah. So much of this end game, so much of some marathon OG and Bacchio gelato that I have brought, and went to one of the coolest places yet, the Salem Witch Board Museum.
Honestly, this is again, and I know I said this about House of Seven Gables, but this is another place that I purposefully did not go to because I wanted to wait until you came.
And I'm so glad you waited. What an amazing, funky, cool place. Awesome.
First of all, let me just say, the owner of the Witch Board Museum,
John Kozik,
like, he rocks.
So nice and so accommodating and so fucking knowledgeable.
Well, and the thing is, if you're not looking for it, you might miss it. So let's just point out here.
Yes, local Salem resident, please tell people how to get into this very hard to find. It is really well labeled, so you're not going to have too hard of a time, but it is kind of hidden.
But it's interesting, and it seems very appropriate. So you're walking down Essex Street, and there's these cute Harry Potter stores. The wand store, which, by the way, love the Harry Potter wand store.
Super cute. Love it.
And then there's like the Harry Potter, I don't know, I call it the Harry Potter gift store. I'm sure it's got a better name than that. So you walk in this Harry Potter gift store, and in the back, all of a sudden, behind the cash register is the entrance for the Salem Witch Board Museum. And you're like, huh, that's kind of weird. So you pay the nice lady at the register, what was it, to get in?
Admission price is $20, and it is well worth it.
Totally worth it. I would absolutely pay double, by the way, and still go. You go in the back of the Harry Potter store, boom, there it is. And when you walk in, John was waiting like right there. And he was like ready to chat, which of course we were ready to chat. I must say, first and foremost, probably like the most welcoming place we went into. Like, this guy was so thrilled that we were there, and we were so thrilled to be there. And it was like a chat fest from the get-go.
It's a very large room and a half, basically, and it is covered floor to ceiling in spirit boards, talking boards, Ouija boards. And if you are lucky enough to be there when the proprietor, owner, and historian, John Kozik, is there, he loves to talk about them, knows so much about all of these boards, and he will happily talk your ear off about every single one.
The guy is just so knowledgeable. Like, every single one has a story, whether it be the story how he got it, the story of who made it, the story of who used it. It's like everyone has a unique thing, and he knows every last detail. And it was so much fun.
And he has fun stories on how he found these boards or going to get them. But let's take a moment and listen to our earlier selves right after we left the Salem Witch Board Museum earlier today. So today we went to the Witch Board Museum in Salem. What'd you think? I loved it. I loved it from the first second I walked in. It was covered wall to wall, floor to ceiling with witch boards, talking boards, Ouija boards, pieces of history, spirit boards. And John Kozik was so knowledgeable, so friendly, and had so much to say about everything in that room.
I don't even know who was more excited to be there. Him excited that we were there, or us excited to be there.
We were like little kids right from the first second. I was practically bouncing in my shoes.
And, you know, guys, I'm going to post so many Instagram photos of these spirit boards that we saw. He has one of the original boards that was, what do you say, it was created out of a coffin. They took coffin wood and made it.
That's right. They used wood from a coffin to make it. It was made outside of Rochester, New York, for the Fox sisters. He said they were spiritualists who did knocking, and they knocked for each letter of the alphabet. So A would be 1, B would be 2.
Like in Morse code.
Exactly. Well, no, Morse code's different.
Well, but a similar concept.
Right, but like a much longer, harder to do Morse code.
That's annoying. I'm glad they created witch boards.
Exactly. So if, things could take a long-ass time to knock out.
Well, a Ouija board is not no short stint either.
Wow.
So the knocking would have been like hours-long seances.
To say someone's name.
Yeah. So this place was amazing. The other thing that I thought was cool is he has 3 times what he has in there now, and he rotates it out basically 3 times a year. What do you say? He has a movie theme, a music theme, and I can't remember what the other theme was, but it was really good. So he actually has way more than what he displays at any one given moment.
So you can go there and see different displays at different times of year. And another thing I found fascinating was that he got into them because of his grandmother. He saw that his grandmother used to use a Ouija board, and she would use it by herself and get information that way. And he was never allowed to be in the same room with her when she would do the Ouija boards. He would have to go somewhere else. And so he said he would often kind of like watch while she would do it, when she
peering around the doorway corner.
Right, like peeking through the corner or the keyhole, trying to see what was going on. And that kind of started his fascination with the talking board.
Which I find funny, because isn't like the whole like unspoken rule, don't use it alone? And this guy gets into it because his grandmother used it alone.
He says, a lot of what he says he prefaces with your belief. He feels very strongly that the board itself doesn't have any hard and fast rules. It's your belief, right, what you put into it. So for him, using it alone is no big deal.
Right.
Although from what I think you said, I didn't ask him today, but from what you said, he doesn't use them at all.
I don't believe so. I believe I heard, because if you haven't also checked out the personal interview with this lovely man, you can find that on Salem the podcast. I believe on that interview, he had said he actually does not use them. I so would. Every day I'd use one. Every day.
Yeah.
I'd get to work without the board.
So many cool ones there. And we'll definitely go over our informal interview with John and talk a little bit more later about our impressions in the different boards and some of the history, because some of them have amazing history, some from different TV shows. He has 666 boards from Glenn Danzig, all of them signed on the back.
Isn't that cool?
How cool is that? Boards from, doesn't he have a board from The Exorcist?
No, Stranger Things.
He has a Stranger Things board.
And he says that the Stranger Things board is actually supposed to be his most haunted board, and that someone sent it with a letter saying, like, basically, do not ever let this get back into my possession. Keep it, do whatever. I don't want it.
And he says people that walk in there are drawn directly to that board and feel that there's a lot of haunt right there, that there's a lot of energy in that board, even though it's kind of new.
Ironically enough, I didn't feel it. I kind of felt more attracted to this particular board that I thought was super cool. Never seen anything like it. It was a Ouija board in Braille.
I felt drawn to that one as well. That one felt like it had a lot of energy.
And it looked like it was like carved out of wood. And very cool. Very, very
Definitely
cool.
Interesting. So many different kinds, including a weed Ouija board.
Oh my God, that was so awesome. It was called the Ouija. Get it? Ouija.
And it had Puff Puff Pass on it, and of course the fan leaves. And
actually, the planchet was a leaf with a little eye in the center of it.
Very cool.
But yeah, he had some that were Asian themed. He had some from the Witch Board movie. There was a Witch Board movie themed one.
He had a lot of
some really
movie
good ones.
paraphernalia, books, posters, history.
Anything that had to do with, and you know what, this was, I thought, very cool. He had, back in like the 20s and 30s and 40s, they made greeting cards with little children playing with Ouija boards. Also, he had a figurine. The only thing I can equate it to is, remember Precious Moments in the 80s?
Yeah.
It was like a Precious Moment figurine of these two little children playing with a spirit board. I got a picture.
Fun.
Don't worry. I'll post it.
We'll post lots of pictures. And speaking of weed and Ouija boards, right now we're passing a bowl back and forth.
Oh my God, we're passing a bowl. We're not even talking about what we're separately smoking. We're passing.
We're smoking the same thing. We're smoking some Marathon OG, and we're smoking some Bacchio Gelato and some of Chelle's Endgame.
We're kind of doing the salad thing. I like salads. We've always done salads.
We just keep packing bowls. You pack one, I pack one, and we're back and forth. And
I think we've been smoking
track.
for 48 hours straight. I'm pretty sure.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to spark up a bong here of your lovely Endgame. This shit is so sticky.
You know, honestly, this is so funny. This shit is so sticky that it has clogged my grinder, and I'm having a hard time getting the top of my grinder to spin and grind because I have to actually clean it.
There are worse problems to have.
There are worse problems to have, but I actually have to clean my grinder with the cleaning solution because this shit's been so sticky that, yeah, just having a hard time twisting the old grinder.
I can tell why. It's super sticky, and I love it. It tastes fabulous. So we both had such a positive impression going in there, both of the place and the proprietor, John Kozik.
One thing I didn't realize, and this actually is going to make me go back here shortly, is I didn't realize that he literally has 3 times the content, and that every so often, every couple of months, he rotates the content 100%. So I'm actually going to go back in a couple of months just to see his whole next wave of inventory.
And there's so much to see there. One of my favorites was the very first talking board that's known in the United States. It was rumored to have been made for the Fox sisters, who were based in Rochester, New York, and possibly started the entire spiritualist movement in the United States back in the early to mid 1800s.
But kind of taking it back a step, Ouija boards, talking boards, witch boards, some people say they're the same thing, kind of different, kind of the same. But one of the first talking boards, so to say, mentioned was found in China in 1100 AD. So these things weren't necessarily invented by Parker Brothers.
They actually weren't at all invented by Parker Brothers. Like you said, the original talking board goes back 1,000 years.
Yeah, it was something like the Song Dynasty. And I believe they called it the Fuji. And I know that sounds silly, but I'm dead ass. I believe it was called the Fuji from the Song Dynasty.
And it was kind of like the modern day planchette, but it had a pencil or a pen or a writing implement in it. And the automatic writing that you would see talked about during the spiritualist times used this automatic writing thing. Basically, it was a device that held a pencil for you, and you would lightly touch your fingers on it and close your eyes, and the spirits or energies would talk through you by making it write out words while you weren't even looking.
Basically, like a modern day planchette with a pencil minus the board.
So kind of what happened was there was this whole spiritualist movement because at the time in the 1800s, a lot of people were dying. There was sickness, there was war. And so in the mid-19th century in Europe, there's this whole spiritualist craze where people are trying to contact the dead, and they're coming up with all these different ways to do it. And that's when kind of mediumship became popular. And it came to the US in about 1848. These 2 girls, Catherine and Margaretta, Maggie and Kate Fox, were born in upstate New York, and their house was rumored to be haunted, and all sorts of rappings and spirit noises were happening. And the girls discovered they could communicate with these spirits, and it was supposedly the spirit of a traveling salesman who had died and been buried in their cellar. And they could communicate with these spirits through some sort of rapping, and they developed a way to talk to them by saying 1 rap means yes and 2 means no. And then later, they expanded that to be letters of the alphabet, like 1 for A, 2 for B. And as you can imagine, this would get pretty unwieldy. How long would it take to spell out a sentence that way?
In the time when they were using that, the earlier 1800s, it was actually considered a serious form of spirit communication, a serious device. But from about 1890 on, it was really more considered kind of like a parlor game.
Right. Yeah. Earlier, the spiritualists, like the Fox sisters, are using these boards. Basically, it was shorthand. They went from these wrappings that could take a very long time to using this board that had letters, all the letters of the alphabet, and numbers on it. And then they would use the planchette, this other type of spirit device, to point out the letters and point out the numbers. And it could have any other symbols. John Kozik, the curator of the Salem Witch Board Museum, mentioned that the other symbols really aren't important. In his research, he's found that the only importance are the letters and the numbers. The other symbols vary depending on the maker of the board and what they wanted.
But I thought it was cute. We saw a board that instead of having a sun and a moon, it had a witch and a cat, which was super cute.
Yeah.
But I don't know why, but I've thought for years that those symbols actually meant something. So I was kind of surprised to find out that they in fact do not.
Yeah, I was as well. I thought every symbol on the board had to be some important historical meaning, but no, it can be pot leaves, it could be naked people, it could be, whatever you want it to be, whatever symbols matter to you. John mentioned a few times that he doesn't really believe in the magic of these things. He just really enjoys them for what they are, but he knows that people very much do place a lot of belief in them. And he says that in his opinion, he's found that people who make their own or come up with their own symbols to put on it find more power in that and that it works better for them.
And we'll get to that later.
Yeah, we kind of will.
But so on July 1st, 1890, a man by the name of Elijah Bond actually took a talking board, a spirit board, a witch board, and patented it. What he did was he and a group of folks used that Ouija board and asked it what it wanted to be called. And that's where the name Ouija board came from. This board said that's what it wanted its name to be. And he patented that.
So I heard an interesting story about that time that they got the patent. When they brought this board to the patent office to patent it, the patent officer said, well, that's a lot of claims for what it does. I'm not going to give you the patent unless you can prove it. And so they sat down with this Ouija board, and I believe it was Elijah Bond's sister-in-law who put her hands on the planchette, and the patent officer said, "What's my name?" And it spelled out his name. Supposedly, they didn't know it. However, one of the people with them was a patent person, so he probably would have known it. I mean, it's probably information they had, but supposedly
they probably
they
paid somebody.
But in front of the patent officer, the Ouija board spelled out his last name, which was supposedly unbeknownst to any of the members in the party. And so they actually used the fact that they proved it worked in front of the patent officer as part of their selling points. And so I did hear a couple different stories about how the name came to be.
Yeah, I heard that they basically asked the board and the board said that's what it wanted to be called.
Yep, and then it came up and it said Ouija and that was Egyptian for good luck. Another legend kind of expanded on that. Helen Peters, who was the sister of Elijah Bond, and she was supposedly a spiritualist. At the patent office, supposedly, is where they asked it what the name was, and it spelled out Ouija. But she was also wearing a locket with the name Ouija, which is just a D instead of a J, which was a popular person at that time, supposedly. I don't know.
Never heard that.
And William Fuld, who was part of this group, well, he was the one that Elijah Bond sold it to. He sold the rights of the Ouija board to William Fuld. And he says that Ouija was actually a combination of French and German for yes. And so that's why they named it that. I don't know. There's a lot of different rumors as to where the name came from. And I don't know if any of them are right.
Probably unless you are those two people, Elijah and his sister, there'll be no way to know for sure.
During our visit, John Kozik mentioned that he picked up his friend Murch to go buy. He heard about a very rare Ouija board in Florida. And so he says he went and grabbed his friend Murch, and they just drove 21 hours straight through to go buy these Ouija board before anyone else could get it. And I didn't know at the time who Murch was, but I found out that Murch is actually Ouija historian Robert Murch, who's like a professional Ouija researcher. And he's been studying Ouija boards since 1994. And he says, based on his research, that it was Helen Peters, supposedly, that, like you said, they were sitting around and she was using the Ouija board and they asked it what it wanted to be called. And the name Ouija was spelled out and that it meant good luck. And so she does say that she was wearing a locket that said Ouija, which was a women's rights activist at the time that Peters admired. So I don't know. A lot of weird stuff.
I gotta say, though, having gone to this place and just seeing the scope of what he's got and what he knows, first of all, to know that there's somebody out there who knows more than this guy is mind-blowing. But I mean, there's a lot more history to Ouija boards, talking boards, witch boards, whatever you want to call them, than Parker Brothers. And I think that's the fascinating part. Like, who knew they made a board specifically for the Love Boat?
Right?
Who knew that?
And he's got most of them, I think.
You know what I thought was super cool? And I know that you and I talked about this while I was taking probably hundreds of pictures of these, which I will post on our Instagram. Check us out, the Stoned Witches Hour on Instagram. There was one I loved that instead of having, it had the yes and no, but instead of having the alphabet, it had the major arcana of the tarot deck.
Yeah.
Loved that.
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's mixing like a talking board and a tarot deck into one big, beautiful concoction, and I loved it.
Right?
I loved it.
There was the electric board that I guess there was only a few made of. It's called the Electric Mystifying Oracle, and it was made in 1933, and it's a metal board. Most boards at that time, according to John, sold for about $1.50. This one was $5, which was a lot of money during that time. And unfortunately, World War II happened, and so not a lot of people bought it, and they kind of scrapped it. So this particular board, there's only a few of them available. And when this one came up for sale, he says, within 2 hours, he'd rented a car, picked up his friend Murch from Boston, and drove 21 hours down to Florida to get it, because there's only a few of them left. And he doesn't have the planchette for it. So if anybody has the planchette for this Electric Mystifying Oracle from 1933, go see John Kozik at the Salem Witch Board Museum. He would love it.
Give the guy the planchette, man. Just give the guy the planchette.
Right?
You know, I think that one of the things that really kind of struck me was it doesn't matter necessarily what it's made out of or what it looks like. You know, this doesn't have to be some $50 piece you went and bought at some fancy old store. A talking board is a talking board is a talking board, and you can make one out of cardboard and Sharpie markers if that's what it takes.
Yeah, you can literally make them out of anything, and you can use your own symbols, your own symbology, whatever is important to you, or whatever. Like the person who used the tarot cards, I also saw some that had little phrases written around the board in addition to the letters. You know, if that's what's going to work fastest for you to get in touch with your subconscious, with the spirit world or whatever, that's the way to do it.
And I liked that he had some that were kind of like related to, like he had I don't know if it was Barbie per se, but it was like that Barbie hot pink and kind of like marketed towards like preteen girls. It was
right?
like, you know, it kind of like how tarot decks, you can have different artwork. He has a lot that just have different artwork. One that you and I both really liked was one that was in Braille.
Yes.
Very,
that
very
one
cool.
Had a lot of interesting energy from it. And I don't know if it's because it was right next to or right underneath what John Kozik called the most haunted Ouija board that he has, or if it just had its own energy. But It was very fun. Someone came in and asked him what the most haunted board was that he had. And he brought us over to a corner that had a very new, very plain cardboard Stranger Things Ouija board.
Yeah.
And next to it on the wall was a framed letter. And apparently, this museum gets mailed on a regular basis boards that people have found, boards that are cursed, boards that have all sorts of haunted issues or just interesting backstories. And he displays them. I guess he's well known at the post office, and they don't allow him to open anything up at the post office. Because they know what's inside there. He's told he can't open them there.
Now I have a picture of this letter, and I want to read this because I mean it's not funny. It's really not funny, but it's funny. So they wrote, "This package does not have a return address. If it gets lost along the way, please send it to the Talking Board Historical Society." And then it says at the bottom, and it gives the address of that. And at the bottom it says, "Trust me, you don't want it." And I don't know if that's egging me on, but I'm the one who's the fuck around and find out. So it probably is egging me on. But I'm actually looking at a picture of this board right now, which I will post to our Instagram. You know, it's kind of a cute board. It's got like the Christmas lights and I am a glutton for punishment. Glutton for punishment.
I'd use it.
Yeah, right. But I mean, we are a collector of cool mystical things. So for us, this place was like heaven.
It really was. Being able to just look over every single one of these. And somehow, William Fuld, who Bond sold the Ouija board business to, he was a Mason. He was part of the Masonic Society.
Aren't they all?
Right? In this museum, they have the marble slab that was at the foot of his grave, like the footer from his grave, and it has his name and the Masonic symbol. There's just so many different, unique, and interesting things here. I could have spent well over an hour just looking at everything and talking to him. And
Layla, we spent well over an hour.
And I still want to go back. I still did not see everything. He talks about there's more haunted boards there, some that are covered in caution tape and locked in a case that he got with a letter from someone who had found these boards when they moved into the house. And as soon as they unearthed them, bad things started happening in the home. The husband lost his job. The children started having nightmares. Things started moving around the house. And so she kind of sealed them all up, wrapped them up, stuck them in a box full of salt, and then mailed them to the Salem Witch Board Museum. And apparently he gets things like that all the time. And he's well known at a lot of flea markets and across the country. If something interesting comes up, people usually call him first because he's a well-known collector. And he's willing to fly out. He even said he's willing to fly out to California with less than 48 hours notice just to get some interesting boards.
Well, I think it's funny when he talks about the post office workers here in Salem. You know, he runs down to the post office. They hand him a box that's leaking salt.
And then they say, "Get out," before
and
you
everybody's
open it.
just like, "All right, leave with your shit,"
Yep.
If that was upstate New York, they'd be calling like the bomb squad or something. They're like, here's your ritual salt leaking box. Off
right.
with you.
Smells of sage and
demons.
Demons.
No, like this guy, bang up job on the museum. Totally worth going to.
And again, kind of like the Salem Black Hat Society, it's something that someone in Salem saw a need for.
Right.
And okay, so it's a little commercial. Big deal. The money goes towards helping him continue to run this amazing place that he, again, is more than happy to talk about and give you all of his knowledge on, which, we kind of needed for our adventures later that night. Some more interesting facts about the Ouija board. You had mentioned that it was kind of like just a common parlor game. And even Norman Rockwell, the artist Norman Rockwell, who's famous for his depictions of 20th century domestic life in America, he has a painting of a man and a woman using a Ouija board in their living room. And it was that common.
It used to be like, and like if you're at the Witch Board Museum, newspaper ads, magazine ads. It was very common,
Yep.
very, very common.
In 1892, there were 2 factories in Baltimore, 2 in New York, 2 in Chicago, 1 in London. They were selling over 2,000 Ouija boards a week. It outsold Monopoly.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Every time anything bad happens in the world, Ouija board sales surge. Shocker.
Even to this day.
Possibly. I know during the Great Depression and World War One skyrocketed. In 1944, over a period of 5 months, a department store in New York City sold 50,000 boards.
I think it's because people have that, they want to make that connection with the loved one who died at war. It kind of becomes more serious when people become more desperate.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
when people aren't as desperate, then it goes back to being a parlor game.
Yep. In the late 60s, you've got Vietnam, you've got the race riots going on in Detroit, Minneapolis. You've got the Summer of Love thing going on. During that time, over 2 million boards sold.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's wild. Yeah. So it's just, there's so much. And we also learned about the mysterious death of William Fuld. In 1927, he was trying to install a flagpole or something on like the original Baltimore Ouija board factory, the original Baltimore Ouija board factory, and he fell down and he broke some ribs. And apparently, his assistant like threw him in a car and drove him quickly to the hospital. And unfortunately, it was that drive where one of his broken ribs punctured his heart, and he died from it. And on his deathbed, according to John Kozik, William Fuld said, "Don't sell Ouija." So I don't know. They did, though. They ended up selling it, 1970? In the early 70s, they sold it to Parker Brothers.
Yeah. Yeah. And have made millions off of it to this day.
Yep.
You go to Target, you can buy a Ouija board.
That's true. And before 1973, it was just a regular family parlor game. People had one, and it was just a fun, common thing to use. People used it by themselves. They used it with their friends. They used it to try and contact their loved ones. People even used it to write poetry and books.
Well, starting in the 70s and 80s, you started to see more books and movies kind of flooding the market, warning of the Ouija board's dangers, and kind of played upon, back then movies like The Exorcist and things of that nature were coming out. And
well, that's exactly it. It was one movie in particular that made everybody kind of change their minds on the Ouija board. And so it went from being a fun parlor game where maybe you could contact your dead relatives to one movie happened, and then
this dangerous evil spirit wielding death board or some shit.
1973, The Exorcist came out and portrayed the Ouija board as a means to communicate with the devil and demons, and that's when everything changed. And that's when it became bad to use by yourself, and a means for Satan to come in, and a means
because that was also kind of about the time where it seemed to be some widespread fear that devil worshippers were
exactly
in North America, which they were not.
It's the very beginnings of the satanic panic.
Yeah. And so kind of Ouija boards, spirit boards, talking boards, witch boards started getting a shit ass reputation and name in the 80s. And some of those movies and books weren't helping it because, like, for example, you will look up there's 2 movies right now, Ouija and Ouija 2. Mm-hmm. They're kind of that horror, everybody dies, your soul gets ripped out bullshit. And they're playing on that fear at this point and not giving necessarily accurate information in regards to, can you summon the devil? I'm not here to say yes or no. But, they're preying on fear to make movies, which which has undercut the actual value of a talking board.
And I think there's a lot of value to it. The Fox sisters kind of got famous for, communicating with spirits, and people really enjoyed using this board to try and contact loved ones that had gone on. And like a lot of divination tools, there's good and bad. And there's times where things come out of it that you're like, wow, that absolutely blew my mind. I have no idea how that got that information or where that came from. And there's other times where you're like, this is fake as fucking shit.
Right, right.
And it just kind of goes, it swings both ends of that spectrum. But I do find a lot of value in, we know that there's the whole ideomotor response. A lot of what people do with the Ouija board is your subconscious. You put your fingers on that planchette along with other people, and someone's subconscious can take over without anyone knowing or even feeling like they're moving it. That maybe the combined subconscious of everyone kind of taps into that. Or maybe there's a spirit or someone outside of our knowledge or an energy outside of our knowledge that's moving that around. We don't know. But I do know that there was a study done on Ouija by some researchers at the University of British Columbia, their visual cognition lab.
Ooh.
A researcher, Dr. Ron Rensink, professor of psychology and computer science, psychology postdoctoral researcher Helena Gaushu, and Dr. Sidney Fells, who's a professor of electrical and computer engineering.
Smoke a little more.
Right? They decided to see what exactly happens when people sit down and use a Ouija board. So they conducted a study. Basically, they had people sit down in front of a Ouija board, and there was mechanical hands that would do the Ouija board with them. They were told that the mechanical hands were being controlled by a person in another room. And what it really was is the mechanical hands were just exaggerating their own motions. It was mirroring their motions, any motions they made with their hands. Those hands would replicate just a little bit bigger. So it was all them moving the planchette. And what they found was that when people were asked a series of questions on their own, they were right about 50% of the time getting these questions. When they were asked to use the Ouija board to answer these questions, they were right about 65% of the time.
Oh.
So somehow, some way, whether it's their subconscious or some other entity or energy giving them information, these researchers in 2014 found that people were more right, 15%, which is significant. They were significantly more right than random chance using the Ouija board.
Oh, wow.
Pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
And it carried through even if they used the Ouija board. So they'd sit down, two people across from each other. They'd put their fingers on the planchette and they'd be blindfolded. The other person would then get up and leave without the first person knowing that they were gone.
Oh.
So they would think there was another person using the Ouija board with them. And again, when they were asked these questions, they were right 65% of the time. And they often would complain that they felt like the other person was moving the planchette when there was no one else touching it but them.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
So
but I think that there's been some movies that have kind of swung back around. What was it? The Conjuring, I believe. They're kind of bringing back that interest.
Mm-hmm.
Good, bad, or indifferent. I think personally there is value to talking boards and spirit boards, witch boards, Ouija boards. But I want to just take a quick second and talk about, what do you feel about some of the common superstitions around Ouija boards? Like, you can't use it alone, or you always have to say goodbye. Like how do you feel about some of those things? Do you think they're legitimate or just kind of wacky?
Some I don't. That's a good question. I guess you'd have to give me a specific one.
How about using it alone? Do you think that it is like opening the gates of hell if you use it alone, or would you totally be like, yeah, fuck it, I'm going to use it by myself. Let's do this. I
think that you could use it alone, but I'm going to put a lot of caveats in that.
Inside a salt circle.
Sure. I think a Ouija board is like most tools of divination. It's a fabulous tool for you to get in touch with yourself, your spirit guides, your ancestors, your subconscious, your higher self. I think it is a fabulous way to do that. And so doing that by yourself can be very therapeutic, can be very healing. A lot of us do this work by ourselves. So I think using a Ouija board by yourself is okay in that type of situation. Would I take a Ouija board into a well-known, highly haunted, highly active situation and throw that bitch down and start using it? No, I would not. But in my home, in a place where I do meditation, where I do ancestor work, where I do inner self work, yes, I would use it alone there because my intention there is to get in touch with what I guess it comes back to intention, like most things. If my intention is to get in touch with my higher self and I'm in a protected space and a good space, then yes, I would use that board that way. But again, if I put myself into a very dangerous situation, would I use it then? No.
I totally agree. What about saying goodbye? I kind of buy into the saying goodbye thing, just like, you don't kick someone out of your house and just, boot to the ass and slam the door. You're kind of, all right, see you later, gots to go. What do you think about the goodbye thing?
I think about it as the slamming the door, boots to the ass, you gots to go. I don't necessarily think I have to like make the planchette go to goodbye, but I do feel that I have to close it in some way. Yeah, I have to say, this circle's closed, this channel is closed. Basically, I don't care where the fuck you go, but you can't stay here.
Right. But some people have this, if the planchette doesn't go to goodbye, you've opened up God knows what.
And there's power in ritual and there's power in belief. And if that's something that you have heard over and over and over again, then that's a powerful thing. And so I feel that if I'm in a space with someone who feels that's the best way to say goodbye, that's fine. As long as we say goodbye and close that door, I'm good with it.
Any superstitions, other ones that you've heard of that you follow by or think are silliness?
Let's see. I've heard the don't use it alone. I've heard the, don't use it on Friday the 13th, but that's just silly. Don't use it during a full moon. Also just silly.
Wouldn't that be the best time to use it?
Let's see. I've heard that now we've talked about objects holding on to energies. How do you feel about secondhand Ouija board or spirit boards that were given to you or spirit boards that have been said to have bad energy? Would you use one of those? And if so,
absolutely. How? Same as I use tarot deck, a hand-me-down tarot deck. Same concept. You cleanse that shit. Good to go. Let's rock.
Yeah.
I do maybe I over believe, but I do believe that nothing a little cleansing can't take care of.
I agree. If you
so yeah, I would use a secondhand board just like I would take a secondhand tarot deck. But yeah, after I cleansed it and stuff, I'd totally rock it. I'd be good with that.
How do you feel, and have you ever had a planchette move on its own?
I have. I was still living with my mother. I was probably 15, 16. I had just got this Ouija board for Christmas. I had convinced my mother finally that that's what I wanted for Christmas. My cousins were at my house and you remember pop-up campers?
Mm-hmm.
We had a pop-up camper in our backyard and I took my cousins and my younger sister out into this pop-up camper and we had it on the table and we had been playing with it and fooling around with it, who's the true love of my life? Stuff you do when you're 15.
Yeah, of course. Everyone likes to ask that question of a Ouija board.
And I remember we were getting ready to pack stuff up and my mom was yelling because my sister was kind of young and she wanted her in the house. And the planchette moved all the way across the board. And my younger cousin was crying and they kept blaming me and telling my aunt and my mother that I was doing it to scare them. And it wasn't me.
Creepy.
Wasn't me.
Wow.
But I wasn't freaked out.
No?
Not as much as you'd think I'd be being like 15. I was just kind of like, huh, well, that's weird. And I ain't taking the blame for that. It didn't faze me, though. I wasn't like appalled or taken aback or shocked or scared. I was just like, huh.
Well, at that time, you kind of already knew that there was more to the world than you can see with a naked eye. There's layers and things beyond our experience and belief sometimes.
The world is our onion.
And I'm also curious, Chelle, if there's anything that you always do. Is there something you do every single time you use a Ouija board? Like, what is your go-to?
Cleanse it and seal it. Cleanse it when you start. Cleanse it again and seal it when you're done. Don't be dumb.
Cleanse it and seal it sound like very witchy terms to me. So could you tell us what you mean by cleanse when you talk about cleansing the board?
Like with some sage, kind of just sage it over before I start and kind of sage it over when I'm done and kind of give my vibe that we're done here. when
Yeah,
I'm done.
take an incense, a sage. Sage is a good one. Pine is another good one. Pretty much any incense that you really like the scent of or that you feel is a protective, cleansing scent. And Shell's pretty much saying, light your incense and let the smoke roll over the board and think of it as washing away any negative energy on that board and just infusing it with good intentions and safe space.
But I also think the most important part is at the end where you definitely intend this to be done.
Yes.
Whether you buy into the you have to have your planchette go across goodbye or not, regardless of that, your intention at least has to be we're done here. Goodbye.
I absolutely agree. I definitely think that you should come up with either like you said, the planchette going across goodbye or some sort of saying, something you say every single time is a good reminder for yourself. It's a good way to ground yourself and definitely a good way to remind any energies you've been working with that you're done. Time to go home. You're out.
Well, I have a really funny story I want to tell you.
Oh, I love stories. Go for it. I'm going to hit this bowl while you tell me. Why don't you pass that weed over and I'll pack it?
So before I moved to Massachusetts, I would frequently go back and forth between New York and Massachusetts. And one weekend, I had left my daughter home for the weekend, and off I go to spend the weekend in Salem. Now, bear in mind, my daughter was like 25 years old. We're not talking like some infantile here. I leave my 25-year-old, assuming she's responsible child, home alone for the weekend. It was like Saturday night, and I'm going to be coming home the next day anyway. So it's like Saturday night, and it's like 11:30, 12 o'clock. And here I am in Salem for the weekend, and my phone starts ringing off the hook. And I'm like, what is going on? It's my daughter.
Oh,
She is on the other end crying like the crocodile, blubbering, we're all going to die here, freak out. And I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? You know what this kid does? I've kind of lived such a witchy life that I just assumed my children knew certain rules, which come to find out she did. Don't touch mommy's witchy stuff, especially if I'm not.
oh no. Oh no. This is
Now,
starting to sound like The Sorcerer's Apprentice or
yeah, Lord.
or one of how one of those
Seriously.
bad movies starts.
Seriously. So I happen to have possession of a Ouija board that was like from the 1940s, and it's kind of it's got some attachments to it. So, I don't use it very often, and my kids know, do not touch this stuff. I have it up like on the top shelf of my closet. I have clothes on top of it in the closet. Like it's obviously something do not touch of mommy's.
Right.
So I go away for the weekend, and my daughter has her friends over. Couple friends. I know these kids, no harm, no foul. And they decide, for whatever reason, to kind of convince my daughter that it's okay to get one of my Ouija boards out of the closet.
Oh no. Oh no.
So then my daughter starts to tell them how I have this really old one. And well, guess what the friends want to use?
Of course, you got to brag on the really cool witchy stuff that mom's got.
Yeah. So, and then
This is worse than getting into your parents' liquor when we were kids, I think.
Seriously. To use my daughter's words, she was peer pressured into using the old Ouija board.
Pagan pressured.
So then she goes on to tell me, listen to this, you're just going to laugh the more this goes on. So then she tells her friends, well, I know that we should light candles because that'll make it safe. They light.
Oh no, she knows just enough to be dangerous is what you're telling me.
They light 3 candles.
Okay. All right. It's better
like,
than none.
She's like, well, I thought maybe I should have lit 4, but I wasn't sure. So I just lit 3. So they go about their playing with the Ouija board. Well, apparently the candles start exploding and the Ouija board falls off the table. Kids are screaming and she's calling me thinking that she's let some demon in my house. Can I not leave a 25-year-old kid home alone for the weekend without bringing demons to my house? Seriously?
Not in today's day and age, because everyone and their sister knows how to summon a ghost. There's
So,
so many different stories.
here I am. I'm on the phone at like 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. I'm supposed to be away for the weekend, telling my kid how to like smudge the house. And I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you just have to clean up your own messes. I'll be home tomorrow. Figure it out.
You figured out how to get into this poltergeist mess.
It was
You
like
can figure out how to seal things and get out of it.
it was like such a practical magic moment. I was like the ants who just walked away and was like, deal with it. I
You're
will
like,
be home. I'll be home tomorrow. Figure it out till then. She's like, I'm scared. I don't know what to tell you. I'm 300 miles away.
you spilled the candle wax on your own, honey. You clean it up.
So then I get there and she's like, Mom, I knew better. I knew I shouldn't have done this, but I was peer pressured. I'm like, you will never touch. And all of her friends that were there that night will never ever touch your Ouija boards ever again. I'm like, yeah, now you know. Fuck around and find out.
That's exactly
It
right.
took me 2 days to cleanse my house.
I knew a little bit of that story. I hadn't heard the whole thing.
I feel like I came home to a whole bunch of spilt milk. Like I had a mess to clean up when I got home and I was annoyed. She's like, can you handle? I'm like, I can handle this, but I'm annoyed. I was
annoyed practical magic ants.
so then, fast forward, my daughter has her own house and I had stored a couple things in her house. So I go and get a couple of my storage totes I had there. And she goes, Mom, you have to take this tote. And I go, why? And she goes, because I opened it up and it has your Ouija boards in it. I can't have them in my house. That's bad.
Right?
You take them right then and there.
Don't blame her.
Stuff. Yeah, don't touch my stuff.
And she's already established a link with them. So I'm not surprised she wanted them as far away from her as possible. And as we know from John Kozik at the Witch Board Museum, he gets sent boards like that pretty regularly.
If it was up to my daughter, she would have mailed my whole collection to him.
Oh, that would have deserved some sort of punishment right there.
Lord.
She would have been cleaning your house for free for the next decade.
Right. But, you're right. It's curiosity, but sometimes just enough can get you in trouble. And that's the thing with Ouija boards. It's not that talking boards or witch boards or whatever you want to call them, they aren't evil or bad, but don't be stupid either.
Exactly. They're still a tool of divination, much like tarot cards or automatic writing or anything like that. If you use some sort of tool and you have an expectation that this tool is going to unlock something for you, it's going to unlock something for you. And so if you're setting up the situation thinking you're going to channel spirits from the other side, you're opening up that channel to, depending on how good you are at setting up that intention and using that type of magic and that energy. And some of us are very good at it naturally. I describe it like baseball. Everybody can play baseball. Some of us are like amazing pros right off the bat without any practice, and some of us have to work at it. It's the same thing with magic. Some people can channel a lot without even realizing it. So if you set up that intention, you could be setting yourself up for a lot of scary situations.
A lot of chaos.
Yeah, chaos is a good way to put it. Now, if you've listened to our past podcasts, or if you want to listen to us talk about times when we have used Ouija boards, you can listen to episode number 26, Layla's Haunted House Revisited and Missing Daniel Robinson, where I talk about a time when Chelle and I used a Ouija board together and didn't think we'd summoned anything. And I think we actually summoned something pretty big.
Isn't that always the way?
It is. Now, we've talked a little bit before about your impressions of that day, but let's get into that a little bit more deeply, because we have used that Ouija board in a couple different places, not just at my dad's house. We've also used it at a couple different cemeteries, haunted cemeteries that we've done ghost hunting at together before. Anything from those times stand out to you?
Actually, I have a question for you real quick. Do you still have the Ouija board that we used at your dad's house?
Yes, I do.
No shit.
Yep, I do. That Ouija board, and I've talked about it before, that one's 1973. I think it's like 1 year younger than the one that you have. Parker Brothers or what have. It's right over here, but it was from my grandmother. My grandmother was very much into, she liked the occult, and not really the occult. She liked spiritualism. My grandmother liked spiritualism. she gave me my first deck of tarot cards, and she gave me that Ouija board, and she lived in a haunted house, so she was very much into that kind of thing. And it
Gee,
was
why is Laylla a witch? I don't know.
it's surprising too because she's a devout Christian.
Oh,
So yeah,
that's for another
interesting.
podcast.
Different podcast.
To get back to your question, to circle back, and part of the reason I asked that is I wonder if continued use has any effect on effectiveness. Like, for example, is the board I got when I was 14 that I still have, is that board the same or more effective, quote unquote, than say if I went over to Target and got one in right now and opened it fresh out of the package? I personally think that the more you use something, the more it's resonated.
Agree 100%.
That's kind of why I like getting new boards and using them and then keeping them for a long time so that you kind of build that, I don't know, spookiness. So sometime I think that what we should do is get together and do a session with all of our old boards.
Ooh, how fun would that be? I can't wait to tell people what we may have done at Gallows Hill or may not have done.
We don't even listen to our own advice.
No, we don't. We probably are the worst followers of our own advice. But, you can't say we're not fun.
That's the thing. Good ideas aren't always smart ideas, but they always end up being fun ideas. And if you really want to know what the hell we're talking about, you're going to have to wait till the next episode because we fucked around and found out, and you're going to love it.
In the meantime, if you want a little extra Ouija board information, check out episode 26 of the Stoned Witches Hour. You can also check out episode 23 of the podcast We All Pod Down Here. It's a podcast where we were special guests and we talk about the movie Veronica, which is a movie about a young teenage girl who uses a Ouija board to try and contact her father. And then a poltergeist kind of breaks out in her apartment. And this is actually based on a true story. And there is an actual police report talking about the poltergeist activity that was caused by this Ouija board and this young girl. So you can check episode 23 of We All Pod Down Here. And Shell and I are guests on that. You can also check out episode 13 of the Stoned Witches Hour, the one with Tom. And I have a personal story in there of a time at my grandmother's house before I met you, Shell, when I used a Ouija board, if you remember that, and with my friend, and there was some sort of ghostly presence in the stairwell.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. But you can check that out in episode 13.
But what's funny, and I laugh because you know how my family is very non-witchy.
Yeah. As witchy as they are, they say they're not.
Right? Isn't that the way?
Right?
So that one Ouija board I got that's from whatever it was, like 1947 or 1945, that actually belonged to my grandparents. And I obtained it when my grandmother passed away. And they were kind of, so my grandma dies and they're like, oh, give the Ouija board to her. It's totally her thing, which I was thrilled, by the way. And didn't tell anybody how exciting that was to have one that old. Because that was actually when the boards were being made in Salem. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the older kind of hardier boards. It's more thicker. It's not like almost like cardboard. It's like that thick board.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time where they went from actually using very thin wood to using some type of like almost cardboard particle board.
My grandparents had it more as this is what you do when your friends come over, parlor game kind of thing. And then, my mother and my aunt and uncle did it more as a parlor/teenage fun thing.
It makes sense. That was the generation where it was built like that. It didn't change until 1973 with, The Exorcist.
And then fast forward to my grandmother passing away and I obtained this board and I think it is the coolest thing. My daughter, not so much, but I do.
I love that. If any of you out there, if any of our listeners, and you are growing all the time, it's kind of fun actually. So hi all around the world to our listeners.
Hi, everybody.
If any of you have a Ouija board, a talking board, a spirit board of any kind, we would love to see pictures of it. I don't care how new, how old, how handmade, whatever it is, send us in your pictures. Send it to thestonedwitcheshour@gmail.com or send it to us via direct message at Stoned Witches Hour on Instagram. And we would love to see them.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to post some pictures on the old Instagram that we took at the Witch Board Museum because this place, freaking fabulous. If anybody can get there, get there. Super cool. So we will actually have some pictures up of what we saw when we were there.
Yes, very cool.
But I think that we had a really good time and we were kind of motivated. Our next episode, we're going to take a trip up to Gallows Hill. So what do we decide to do? So we were inspired at the Ouija Board Museum, the Witch Board Museum, to go ahead and continue our Salem episodes up to Gallows Hill with a homemade Ouija board. We make our own witch boards, man.
So the moon is almost full. And we decide we need to go to one of the most haunted places in Salem.
I love it.
Now, we did find the place where people were actually hung. And we went to the place where people are rumored to be hung. And
we fuck around and find out.
We definitely fuck around and find out. We tried to be a little careful. Maybe we were a little too careful.
Actually, I think we were overcautious. I think that we might have been a little overcautious for sure.
Yeah, so we decide to go up to Gallows Hill and see if we can summon any spirits.
Why not? Who doesn't want to do that?
Right. Oh my goodness.
But no, we have a lot more on our Salem month. Stay tuned, because what are we doing next week? We're doing Gallows Hill.
Yeah, we're doing Gallows Hill in our own little ghost hunting expedition.
Which, you got to stay tuned for this one, folks, because we
break all our rules.
Do we break all of our rules or do we follow my ideas? I don't know which it is.
I think we kind of did both. I think your ideas were breaking all our rules.
Pretty much. We're going to talk about Gallows Hill and Proctor Sledge. This next episode, we got a little surprise for you, and we're going to have some fun.
Stay tuned. See if you can hear any of the EVPs that we may have caught while we were doing our little ghost hunting exploration tour at Gallows Hill during an almost full moon.
If you just want to see just how dumb we are, please stay tuned to our next episode, because, boy, we did a doozy this time.
Yes. Yeah, so tune in next week and see all the craziness 2 witches in Salem, Massachusetts in October can get up to.
We get way too high when we're together. I feel like we're so mellow and high.
Yeah, that's the excuse we're going with this time, Shell. That's exactly what we're going to go with. I'm pretty sure that the Salem police officers have probably heard that excuse before, but...
Daily.
Yes, we're some witches and we got a little too high. We fucked around. We found out. And we need to call in the Sanderson Sisters or the neighbors from Practical Magic to come clean up the mess that we made on Gallows Hill.
Can I just tell you that in the last 4 days, I've seen probably 36 different sets of Sanderson Sisters in the greater Salem area. So they're out, they're about, and boy, they are creating a muck.
Tune in Wednesday at 4:20 a.m. for episode 39 of The Stoned Witches Hour.
I'm high. Let's go get munchies. We'll talk to these guys later.
Yeah, my bowl's empty. We're out.
All right, see ya.
Later.